Hello everyone. Today, I'll be providing a recap of a film titled Heist 88. This movie explores a real-life story that unfolded during one of the largest bank heists in American history. The movie kicks off in the busy city of Chicago, with a man named Jeremy Horn or Mr. Hart, who is here to attend his brother's funeral as he steps into a car and is driven to the church where a service is underway. As the service comes to an end, Marshall encounters his uncle Jeremy. Despite his late father's advice to stay away from Jeremy, Marshall explains to his uncle that he is involved in the music industry and had taken out loans to support his musical endeavors. However, he faced relentless pressure from creditors when he couldn't repay on time. Marshall described how his friends, who were employed at the bank, had attempted to help him secure a loan without success. With his financial situation becoming increasingly dire, Marshall turns to his uncle with hope that he could provide a solution. Upon Jeremy learning that Marshall's friends work at the First National Bank of Chicago, Jeremy began devising his next heist. Jeremy had coordinated a meeting with Marshall's group of friends at a local diner, Rick, LaDonna, and Danny. As they discussed their respective job positions at the bank and the modest salaries they received, Jeremy became more curious about the significance of their roles. Marshall's friends, on the other hand, started to feel increasingly uneasy as Jeremy persistently probed them about their professions, suspecting that he had hidden intentions. After their meal, they promptly decided to leave. Rick and Danny, in particular, Jeremy observed Rick, LaDonna, and Danny's lives closely, becoming convinced that this group of young individuals would be receptive to his proposal. Knowing that all of them were grappling with financial difficulties, he believed they wouldn't pass up the chance to potentially earn millions. Jeremy then extended an invitation to Marshall and his friends, gathering them at a secure location to discuss his plan. As an initial incentive, he offered each of them $500 just for attending the meeting. Jeremy disclosed that his personal wealth was accumulated through outsmarting banks, and he firmly believed they could exploit the banking system's inefficiencies. He emphasized that black individuals consistently faced disadvantages and saw no reason to remain loyal to an institution that showed no concern for the well-being of its black employees. Jeremy explains that LaDonna, who worked in the transfer department and possessed access to the transfer code, would be responsible for adding the code into the system. Afterward, Jeremy intended to connect the call to either Rick or Danny to provide the second confirmation. LaDonna initially hesitated to become involved in a criminal act that could jeopardize her job and life. However, Jeremy enticed her back into the plan with the promise of a Rolex watch. Jeremy's persuasive abilities successfully convinced the team to embrace the plan as they head out. Along the way, they encountered a group of would-be robbers attempting to victimize Jeremy. Marshall and his friends were taken aback by Jeremy's impressive skill in handling the situation, confronting the armed robbers. This display of expertise only reinforced their belief that Jeremy's plan held potential for success. After the meeting, LaDonna, Danny, and the others became increasingly convinced that the man's words held substantial truth, that this whole thing can be blamed on a system failure, as they had experienced system failures before. Despite their honesty in their jobs, they receive meager wages and remain stagnant in their careers. The heist becomes a means for them to combat systemic racism. With unanimous agreement, they embrace Jeremy's plan. Back at the hideout, Jeremy outlined the plan's initial steps. To execute it successfully, they would focus on 3 individuals known for using First Chicago Bank for their money transfers. Their objective is to redirect these transfers to an offshore account in Geneva. To achieve this, the team needed to impersonate the bank's CEO, the person responsible for authorizing the transfers. This would entail redirecting the call to Rick, who would assume the role of the CEO and provide authorization for the transfer. LaDonna soon discovers that First Chicago would completely computerize its banking system within 30 days, necessitating immediate action. Additionally, the group require printouts of the current balances for the targeted companies. Obtaining these necessitate a key card from a higher authority. Jeremy reached out to his old acquaintances, Buddha Ray and Bree Barnes, who had previously collaborated with him on a failed fraud scheme and had since lost trust in him. Nevertheless, Jeremy's persistence drove him to make amends by returning a portion of the money he owed them for the risks they had taken. Shortly before the heist was to be executed, Rick received an enticing offer from John, an individual working at the Board of Trade and the husband of Rick's boss, Harriet. This offer was for Rick to work as a market maker trainee, a role he had long aspired to. He contemplated abandoning the heist plan to seize this dream opportunity. However, Jeremy managed to persuade him otherwise, emphasizing that as a person of color, Rick would face persistent challenges and might eventually regret not taking the chance to secure millions of dollars. Jeremy shared his own experiences, highlighting how despite his brilliance as a financier and his honest work ethic, he had never received opportunities due to his identity. This frustration had driven him to resort to illegal means to achieve his goals. Buddha, Bree, and Jeremy entered the bank premises, assuming the roles of independent auditors. Jeremy successfully acquired 3 key cards and, utilizing his own, gained access to the room housing physical copies of the balance sheets. He retrieved the printouts of the current balance sheet and exited the building with the vital document in his possession. With the balance sheet in hand, they were now prepared to proceed with the heist. After overcoming a few initial obstacles, the day of the heist finally arrived. In the lead-up to the transfer operation, Danny and LaDonna were stationed at their office, while Marshall remained beside his car, ready to pick up his friends once the transfer had been successfully completed. Rick, on the other hand, stood attentively by the phone, eagerly awaiting the second confirmation call, and prepared to enter the transaction code when prompted. Utilizing a pager, the transaction code was disseminated to every member of the group. Jeremy, positioned at a public phone booth, assumed the identity of the company head for the 3 target firms holding accounts at First Chicago Bank. Employing the transaction code, he initiated the transfer process. The second confirmation call was routed to Rick, who promptly repeated the code, resulting in the money being transferred to the account of a fictitious company. After successfully completing 3 bank transfers, LaDonna, Danny, and Rick joined Marshall in his car and convened in a hotel room to await Jeremy's confirmation regarding the success of the heist. Hours passed before Jeremy finally reunited with the group, bearing good news. He had effectively transferred the pilfered funds from the shell company's account to his Geneva-based account. Moreover, he had secured passports and tickets for everyone, ensuring their escape before news of the heist could circulate globally. Back at the First Chicago Bank, Harriet receives documents detailing the 3 recent transactions orchestrated by Jeremy and his crew. Sensing that something's not right, she becomes anxious and rushes to inspect the balance sheets. Upon discovering the initial pages missing, she quickly deduces that the bank has been robbed and promptly alerts the bank to contact the FBI. Seated at the airport, they were all aware that the likelihood of returning to the United States was exceedingly slim. Danny, in particular, displayed heightened emotions, considering he had left his pregnant wife behind. Just before boarding their flight, a troubling revelation came to light. Jeremy observed Danny engaged in a phone call, but it became apparent that he wasn't speaking with his wife as previously claimed. Rather, he was in communication with the FBI. Shortly thereafter, law enforcement descended upon the airport. We come to learn that Danny had struck a deal with the FBI as soon as he became aware of the heist plan. Like the others, he was deeply frustrated by the mistreatment of black employees at the bank, but he wasn't willing to resort to robbery to express his discontent. His conditions were a salary increase and an assurance of freedom for himself and his friends once Jeremy Horn was apprehended. Whether or not the FBI kept their promise remains unknown, but Jeremy Horn had to face trial, and he admitted that his sole mistake was getting caught.